The entire mess hall went silent when the hulking Army sergeant grabbed the quiet Navy petty officer's tray and dumped her food on the floor, laughing about how women didn't belong in uniform. But when she stood up and her sleeves slid back to reveal the dragon tattoo that only Navy SEALs who completed the most classified missions are authorized to wear, every service member in that room realized they were about to witness a reckoning that would shut down the entire base. If you love your mom and dad, hit that subscribe button and show some love. This story will give you chills. Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia was the largest naval base in the world, home to thousands of service members from all branches of the military, who worked in various capacities supporting the Navy's Atlantic Fleet operations. The base sprawled across miles of waterfront property, with piers for aircraft carriers and submarines, administrative buildings, training facilities, and all the support infrastructure needed to maintain America's naval power. Among the many facilities was the main mess hall, a cavernous dining facility that served thousands of meals daily to enlisted personnel and junior officers, a place where different units and branches mixed during mealtimes in a generally cordial atmosphere. On a humid August afternoon, the mess hall was crowded with a lunch rush, long lines of service members in various uniforms moving through the cafeteria-style serving lines and finding seats at the rows of tables that filled the space. The noise level was high, hundreds of conversations mixing with the clatter of trays and utensils, and the atmosphere was relaxed as people enjoyed their break from duty. Nobody was paying particular attention to the lone figure who entered the mess hall and joined the serving line, just another sailor among hundreds. Petty Officer First Class Alexandra, Alex, Rivera was 31 years old, though her youthful features and compact 5'6" frame often made people assume she was younger. She had dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, brown eyes that seemed to hold secrets, and an athletic build that was evident even under her Navy working uniform. What wasn't evident to the casual observer was that Alex was a member of one of the most elite and secretive units in the entire military, someone who'd spent the last 8 years conducting operations that would never be publicly acknowledged, someone who'd earned recognition and decorations that she could never discuss with anyone outside her small community of operators. Alex normally ate in a smaller facility reserved for special operations personnel, but today she'd been at a meeting in the main administrative complex and had decided to grab lunch at the main mess hall rather than making the longer trip back to her unit's area. She'd kept a low profile throughout her career, preferring anonymity and avoiding attention, which had served her well in the shadowy world of special operations, where the best operators were often the ones nobody knew about. She moved through the serving line, took her tray of food, and found an empty table in a quieter corner of the mess hall where she could eat quickly and get back to work. She'd been eating for perhaps 5 minutes when she became aware of a group of soldiers approaching her table. There were 4 of them, all Army personnel wearing combat uniforms with various unit patches, and they were being loud and boisterous in the way that young military personnel sometimes were when they were in a group and feeling invincible. The leader of the group was a staff sergeant, a large man who stood about 6'3" and weighed well over 200 pounds, with a shaved head, a thick neck, and the kind of aggressive body language that suggested he was used to intimidating people. The sergeant's name was Marcus Webb, and he had a reputation on the base as someone who liked to push boundaries and assert dominance, particularly over people he perceived as weaker or lower in the hierarchy. He'd been in the Army for 6 years, had deployed twice to Afghanistan in a combat support role, and had developed an inflated sense of his own importance and toughness. He also had well-known issues with women in the military, frequently making disparaging comments about female service members and questioning whether they belonged in uniform. Webb noticed Alex sitting alone and saw an opportunity for entertainment at her expense. He approached her table with his 3 companions following, and his voice was loud enough to carry across the nearby section of the mess hall. "Well, well, what do we have here? A little Navy girl all by herself. You lost, sweetheart. The secretarial pool is in a different building." Alex looked up from her food, her expression neutral, and assessed the situation with the trained awareness that had kept her alive in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. For men, all larger than her, one clearly looking for confrontation, others following his lead. She could see this escalating and decided to try the diplomatic approach first. "Just having lunch, Sergeant. Not looking for any trouble." Her calm, quiet response seemed to irritate Webb rather than defuse the situation. He moved closer to her table, invading her space in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate. "Oh, you're not looking for trouble? That's good, because you Navy types can't handle real combat anyway. You know what you're good for? Swabbing decks and looking pretty for the cameras. Real soldiers do the actual fighting." The comment was deliberately offensive and factually wrong, but Alex didn't take the bait. She'd learned early in her career that responding to provocations usually made things worse, and she had nothing to prove to someone like Webb, who clearly had his own issues to work through. "I'm sure you're very proud of your service, Sergeant. If you'll excuse me, I'm trying to enjoy my lunch." Webb's face reddened at being dismissed so calmly. In his worldview, a junior enlisted sailor, especially a female, should have been intimidated and deferential when a senior Army NCO addressed her. Her lack of reaction felt like disrespect, and his ego demanded he reassert dominance. He reached down and grabbed Alex's food tray, lifting it off the table. "You know what? I don't think you've earned the right to eat in the same mess hall as real warriors. Maybe you should take your food somewhere else." Before Alex could respond, Webb flipped her tray over, dumping her food onto the floor in a wet mess of gravy, vegetables, and meat. The sound of the tray hitting the floor and the crash of her drink cup echoed through the suddenly quiet mess hall as hundreds of service members turned to see what was happening. Webb's three companions were laughing, enjoying the show, while other nearby diners looked uncomfortable but uncertain whether to intervene. Alex stood up slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate, and the change in her demeanor was subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. The quiet, unassuming sailor was gone, replaced by someone whose very presence radiated controlled danger. She looked at the mess on the floor, then up at Webb, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried an edge that made several nearby service members shift uncomfortably. "Sergeant, you've made a mistake. You're going to want to apologize, clean this up, and walk away. Right now. That's your one chance." Webb laughed, genuinely amused by what he perceived as an absurd threat from someone half his size. "Or what? You gotta report me? File a complaint? Get your feelings hurt? Let me tell you something, little girl. This is the military, not a safe space. If you can't handle getting your lunch dumped, you definitely can't handle combat." As he was speaking, Alex's sleeve had shifted slightly when she stood up, and a few people near enough to see her forearm noticed something that made their eyes widen. There was a tattoo visible on her inner forearm, a detailed dragon rendered in black and red ink, and anyone familiar with Special Operations community traditions knew exactly what that tattoo signified. The dragon tattoo was not officially sanctioned or publicly acknowledged, but within the Navy SEAL community, it was known that operators who completed certain highly classified missions, operations that involved the most dangerous and sensitive work, sometimes got this specific tattoo as recognition among their peers. One of the nearby sailors, a young petty officer who'd been hoping to try out for SEAL training, saw the tattoo and his jaw dropped. He immediately pulled out his phone and started recording, recognizing that something significant was about to happen. Others near him noticed his reaction and started paying closer attention to the confrontation, and murmurs began spreading through the mess hall as people started understanding that this wasn't just a random sailor being harassed by a bully. Webb was oblivious to the change in atmosphere, still focused on humiliating Alex in front of everyone. "What's the matter? You too scared to even respond? You just gonna stand there like a—" He reached out to push Alex's shoulder, a physical escalation that crossed a clear line, but his hand never made contact. Alex moved with a speed that was shocking to everyone watching, her hand snapping up to catch Webb's wrist mid-motion, and suddenly the large sergeant found his arm trapped in a grip that felt like iron. "Last warning, Sergeant," Alex said quietly, still giving him a chance to back down. "You don't want to do this." But Webb's ego wouldn't let him back down, especially not in front of dozens of witnesses. He tried to pull his arm free and found he couldn't, which only made him angrier. He swung at Alex with his other hand, a wild haymaker that would have knocked out most people if it had connected. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, but would be replayed thousands of times in videos that would spread across social media within hours. Alex slipped Webb's punch with minimal movement, stepped into his guard, and executed a perfect arm bar takedown that put the much larger man flat on his back on the mess hall floor with his arm hyperextended and completely controlled. Before Webb's 3 companions could react, Alex had released the arm and moved to a standing position, her hands up in a non-threatening posture that made it clear she was defending herself, not attacking. 2 of Webb's companions rushed at her, and Alex defended herself with techniques that demonstrated years of high-level training. She redirected the first attacker's momentum and used it to send him crashing into an empty table. The second attacker she stopped with a precise strike to his solar plexus that dropped him to his knees gasping for air. The third soldier wisely decided not to get involved and backed away with his hands up. The entire mess hall was in chaos now, with some people recording on phones, others calling for the military police, and many just standing in shocked silence at what they'd witnessed. Webb was back on his feet, his face purple with rage and humiliation, and he pulled something from his pocket that made several people scream. It was a tactical knife, a 4-inch folding blade that he'd apparently been carrying in violation of base regulations, and he advanced on Alex with clear intent to harm her. This was the moment when Alex made a decision that would have immediate and far-reaching consequences. She reached to her waistband and pulled her Navy ID card, holding it up for everyone to see while addressing Webb in a voice that carried authority that was impossible to ignore. "I am Petty Officer First Class Alexandra Rivera, attached to Naval Special Warfare Development Group. You are threatening a federal officer with a deadly weapon in front of hundreds of witnesses. Put the knife down now, get on the ground, and this can end without you spending the next 10 years in military prison." The name Naval Special Warfare Development Group meant nothing to most of the people in the mess hall, but several of the military personnel recognized it as the official name for SEAL Team 6, the most elite counterterrorism unit in the American military. The dragon tattoo suddenly made sense to those who understood the reference, and the casual competence with which Alex had handled multiple larger attackers took on new meaning. This wasn't some random sailor. This was an operator from the most secretive and capable unit in the special operations community. Webb hesitated, the knife still in his hand, reality starting to penetrate through his rage. Military police were running into the mess hall, having been called by several witnesses, and they immediately assessed the scene. A large man with a knife facing off against a much smaller woman who was identifying herself as a SEAL Team 6 operator, with dozens of phones recording everything. The senior MP, a Navy Master-at-Arms chief, immediately drew his sidearm and ordered Webb to drop the knife. For a moment, it seemed like Webb might actually be foolish enough to attack either Alex or the MPs, but self-preservation finally kicked in, and he dropped the knife, his hands shaking as the full weight of what he'd just done began to sink in. The MPs moved in quickly, securing Webb and his companions while other personnel secured the knife as evidence. The senior chief approached Alex, his expression showing both professional concern and the kind of respect that SEALs commanded among other military personnel. "Ma'am, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Alex shook her head, her adrenaline starting to fade, but her composure still perfect. "I'm fine, Chief. But you're going to want to secure all the video that was recorded here. This incident is going to need a thorough investigation." Word of the confrontation spread across the base with shocking speed, amplified by the videos that were already being shared on social media and through unofficial military communication channels. Within an hour, the base commander, a Navy admiral, had been briefed on the incident and had ordered a complete lockdown of the base while the investigation was conducted. No personnel were allowed to leave, all activities not related to essential operations were suspended, and the entire base essentially froze as the Navy took the incident seriously. The video footage showed clearly what had happened: a senior Army NCO harassing and physically confronting a junior Navy sailor, dumping her food, attempting to assault her, and then pulling a knife when she defended herself. It also showed Alex identifying herself as a SEAL Team 6 operator and demonstrating combat skills that left no doubt about her credentials. The fact that Webb had attacked someone from the nation's premier counterterrorism unit in front of hundreds of witnesses, while she was simply trying to eat lunch, was going to have massive consequences. Admiral James Morrison, the base commander, watched the video footage with a mix of anger and disbelief. He'd been in the Navy for 30 years and had seen a lot of things, but this incident was extraordinary in its stupidity and its potential ramifications. He immediately contacted the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Development Group, a Navy captain named Sarah Chin, who was known throughout the special operations community as a no-nonsense leader who protected her people fiercely. "Captain Chen, I'm calling about the incident involving one of your people, Petty Officer Rivera," Morrison began. "I want you to know that we're taking this very seriously, and the personnel involved in harassing and assaulting her are going to face the full weight of military justice." Chen's response was measured but firm. "Admiral, I appreciate that, and I trust your investigation will be thorough. I should inform you that Petty Officer Rivera is one of our most experienced operators. She's conducted missions that I can't discuss even with you, and she's earned multiple decorations for valor that are classified. The dragon tattoo that's visible in the videos? That's something only a handful of people in the entire special operations community have earned. This wasn't just an attack on a sailor. This was an attack on someone who's put her life on the line for this country more times than most people serve deployments." Morrison absorbed this information. "Understood, Captain. Can you brief me on why one of your operators was eating lunch in the main mess hall unescorted?" Chin explained that Alex had been at a meeting and had simply stopped for a quick meal, that there was no requirement for SEAL Team 6 personnel to be escorted on their own base, and that the incident had been completely unprovoked harassment that had escalated to assault. The investigation moved quickly. The video evidence was irrefutable, showing clearly that Alex had tried multiple times to de-escalate the situation, had only used physical force in self-defense, and had shown remarkable restraint given her capabilities. Webb's service record was examined and revealed multiple complaints about his treatment of female service members, incidents that had been inadequately addressed by his chain of command. His 3 companions were found to have been complicit in the harassment and had participated in the physical assault. Sergeant Marcus Webb was charged with assault, threatening a federal officer, carrying a prohibited weapon on base, conduct unbecoming, and several other offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. His military career was effectively over, and he was facing potential prison time. His 3 companions received lesser but still serious charges. The investigation also revealed systemic failures in how complaints about Webb's behavior had been handled, leading to disciplinary action against several Army officers in his chain of command who'd failed to address the pattern of harassment. but the incident had consequences that went far beyond just the individuals involved. The base lockdown had lasted for 6 hours while investigators secured evidence and interviewed witnesses, disrupting operations and costing significant time and resources. The video footage had gone viral on social media, with millions of views and countless comments from people outraged that a SEAL operator had been harassed and assaulted simply for being a woman in uniform. News organizations picked up the story, running headlines like, "Army Sergeant Attacks Navy SEAL in Mess Hall," and "Female Special Operations Warrior Defends Herself Against Assault on Military Base." The incident became a national conversation about several issues: the treatment of women in the military, the problem of harassment and assault in military culture, the failure of leadership to address toxic behavior, and the incredible capabilities and service of female special operations personnel who operated in shadows and rarely received public recognition. Alex found herself thrust into an unwanted spotlight, with requests for interviews from major media outlets, invitations to speak at events, and attention from senior military and political leaders. Alex handled the attention with the same low-key professionalism that had characterized her entire career. She gave a single official statement through the Navy's Public Affairs Office, emphasizing that she'd simply defended herself using appropriate force, that she appreciated the support but wanted to return to her duties, and that the real story should be about the need for military culture to evolve to ensure all service members were treated with respect regardless of gender. She declined all media interview requests and most speaking invitations, preferring to let her actions speak for themselves. The Navy, however, saw an opportunity in the incident. Senior leaders recognized that Alex's story, properly told, could help with recruiting and retention of women interested in military service, and could demonstrate the Navy's commitment to equality and professionalism. After consultation with Alex, and with her reluctant permission, the Navy released some details about her service record that had previously been classified or simply unknown to the public. The information revealed was extraordinary. Alex had enlisted in the Navy at age 19, had excelled in basic training and her initial technical rating, and had been recruited for special operations training after instructors noticed her exceptional physical capabilities and mental toughness. She'd been in the first group of women to attempt the brutal SEAL qualification training after the program opened to females, and she'd been one of only 2 who'd made it through the entire pipeline. She'd then spent 8 years with SEAL Team 6, participating in classified counterterrorism operations in multiple countries, earning a Bronze Star with Valor Device and a Purple Heart for wounds received in combat, and establishing herself as one of the unit's most capable operators. The dragon tattoo that had been visible in the mess hall video was explained, at least partially. While the Navy couldn't discuss the specific missions that earned someone that recognition, they confirmed it was associated with participation in operations of exceptional difficulty and national importance. Military analysts and former special operations personnel who spoke to media noted that only a tiny fraction of SEAL Team 6 operators ever received that recognition, making Alex part of an elite group within an already elite unit. The public response was overwhelmingly supportive of Alex and critical of Webb and the culture that had enabled his behavior. Veterans organizations issued statements praising Alex's service and calling for stronger action against harassment in military ranks. Women's advocacy groups highlighted her story as an example of both the capabilities of female service members and the challenges they still faced. Even international media picked up the story, with allies praising American female special operations personnel and adversaries notably silent about an incident that demonstrated capabilities they'd rather not acknowledge. For Alex personally, the aftermath of the incident was complicated. She was grateful for the support and for the Navy's handling of the investigation, but she was uncomfortable with being held up as a symbol or poster child for any particular cause. She'd never sought recognition or fame, had specifically chosen a career in special operations partly because it allowed her to serve without public attention, and now found herself famous in a way that felt contrary to everything she valued about her work. She also struggled with the knowledge that her actions in the mess hall, while clearly self-defense, had resulted in injuries to 3 people and had disrupted the entire base. Alex had spent her career learning to use violence precisely and discriminately, only when absolutely necessary and only to the degree required, and she questioned whether she could have handled the situation differently. Her teammates and commanders reassured her that she'd done everything right, that she'd tried multiple times to de-escalate, that she'd used minimal force, and that the consequences for Webb and his companions were entirely the result of their own choices. The incident also sparked changes in military policy and culture. The Navy and Department of Defense used the high-profile case to reinforce training on harassment prevention, to emphasize that rank didn't excuse inappropriate behavior, and to make clear that all service members, regardless of their specialty or gender, deserved to be treated with respect. Several base commanders implemented new policies for responding to harassment complaints, closing loopholes that had allowed people like Webb to continue problematic behavior without serious consequences. 6 months after the mess hall incident, Sergeant Marcus Webb was court-martialed and received a sentence that included a dishonorable discharge, reduction to the lowest enlisted rank, forfeiture of all pay and benefits, and 18 months in military prison. The sentence sent a clear message that assaulting a fellow service member, particularly one from an elite unit, who was simply trying to eat lunch, would result in the destruction of your military career and your freedom. Webb's 3 companions received lesser sentences, but all were also discharged from service. For Alex, life gradually returned to something resembling normal. The media attention faded as other stories dominated the news cycle, and she was able to return to her duties with SEAL Team 6, conducting the classified missions that were her actual job rather than defending herself in mess halls. She remained humble about the incident, refusing to discuss it except when required for official purposes, and continued to exemplify the quiet professionalism that made her so effective as an operator. But the dragon tattoo that had been visible for just a few seconds in that mess hall confrontation had become famous within military circles. Young women considering military service, particularly those interested in special operations, learned about Alex's story and saw proof that gender didn't determine capability, that with enough dedication and skill, women could serve at the highest levels of military elite units. The tattoo became a symbol of achievement and a reminder that some of the most capable warriors in American service operated in shadows and looked nothing like the stereotypes that people like Webb carried in their heads. Alex occasionally thought about that afternoon in the mess hall, about the sergeant who decided to harass someone based on nothing more than her gender and appearance, who'd escalated a simple encounter into assault and had paid a devastating price for his prejudice and poor judgment. She wondered if Webb had learned anything from the experience, if his time in prison had given him perspective on how his attitudes and actions had destroyed his career and hurt people. She hoped so, but she also knew that change was hard, and that some people never evolve beyond their biases. Years later, when Alex eventually retired from active service, she took a position training new special operations candidates, both male and female. She used her experience to teach not just tactical skills, but also mental resilience, how to handle harassment and discrimination without letting it derail your goals, and how to maintain professionalism even in the face of provocation. She shared her story with new trainees, not to glorify what had happened but to illustrate that their worth as operators would be determined by their skills and performance, not by other people's prejudices. The mess hall, where the incident had occurred, became something of an unofficial landmark on the base, a place where new service members would be told the story of the day a SEAL operator defended herself and triggered a base-wide reckoning with harassment culture. The story was told and retold, often exaggerated in the retelling, but the core truth remained. A woman minding her own business had been harassed and assaulted by someone who thought his size and rank made him invincible, and he'd learned the hard way that assumptions based on appearance could be dangerously wrong. The dragon tattoo on Alex's forearm became one of the most recognizable symbols in special operations community, even as the specific meaning remained partially classified. Other female operators who earned the right to wear it did so with pride, knowing they were part of a small group who'd accomplished extraordinary things in service to their country. And whenever someone asked about it, the story of the mess hall incident served as a reminder that the most dangerous warriors often came in unexpected packages. So that's the powerful story of Petty Officer Alexandra Rivera, the SEAL Team 6 operator whose dragon tattoo and exceptional skills turned a moment of harassment into a base-wide reckoning. Sergeant Webb learned the hardest way possible that you can't judge someone's capabilities by their appearance, and that disrespecting someone based on gender can have devastating consequences when that person happens to be one of the nation's most elite warriors. Now we want to hear from you. Which part of the country are you watching this video from? Drop your state or city in the comments below.